Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever, and welcome back to another episode of the Lawyers in the Making podcast, where it is my job to focus on the unique journeys to the law and law school of professionals in the legal field and law students. But let's talk about what we're doing today, because today we have another wonderful guest. He's a William & Mary Law School graduate and currently works as an attorney at Ankney Law and as a consultant at River Guide Esquire. He's held past positions as an attorney at Hunton & Williams and as an attorney at Troutman Sanders. Finally, he's the author of his brand new book, Raincatcher, a lawyer's marketing memoir. Please be sure to check it out in the description. And of course, we are excited to have him on the podcast today, Mr. Joel Ankney. Before getting into the episode today, a few minutes of ads now. For no ads in the middle, no ads at the end. To support this podcast, please be sure to check out all the sponsors below: Start LSAT, Rhetoric, and LisaBlasser.com. If these sponsors bring great interest to you, please check out the sponsor links below in the description. I love them, and I hope you love them as much as I do. And of course, be sure to check us out at LawyersInTheMaking.substack.com. One word, LawyersInTheMaking.substack.com. Start LSAT, started by former guest Alden Spratt, 21-year-old superstar and now an official sponsor of the Lawyers in the Making podcast. Start LSAT was built on breaking down barriers, allowing anyone access to high-quality LSAT prep. After receiving an 180 perfect score on his LSAT, yes, 180, Alden began building Start LSAT. Start LSAT includes 51 video modules, 400 official LSAT questions, study tips and tricks, and the techniques that took Alden to achieve that 180 perfect score. All for the low price of $110. Yes, that's right, $110. And when using code LITM10, you can get 10% off the Start LSAT self-paced course. But there's more. By using the code LITM100 at checkout, you also get $100 off Alden's upcoming 10-week course for the January LSAT. This 10-week course includes one-on-one tutoring, live classes, the Start LSAT self-paced course with 50-plus modules, weekly classes, access to Law Hub Advantage, and a direct line to the superstar himself, Alden. Alden focuses on building the muscles of your LSAT skills, training them, and making you unstoppable. Check out Start LSAT in the podcast description below at startlsat.com, where you can find offers for the course and one-on-one tutoring. And be sure to use those promo codes LITM100 at checkout for $100 off the 10-week course and LITM10 for 10% off the Start LSAT self-paced course. That is at startlsat.com, one word, startlsat.com, in the description below. Now it's time to talk about one of the sponsors of this podcast, Rhetoric. Rhetoric is a legal tech company that leverages AI to help litigators tailor their arguments to be more persuasive by understanding judges' preferences and tendencies based on their actual filings. A recent study published in Harvard Business Review shows that mirroring a judge's language preferences can increase your odds of success in litigation by 20% or more, and that is exactly what Rhetoric does for you. Back on episode 25, I had the privilege of having Luke Yangling, a good friend of mine and a former guest of the podcast, and from there, Rhetoric thus became a sponsor of the podcast. But now, Rhetoric has some new products to offer. With their brand new product, Cicero, students can replicate the experience of responding to a judge's question in court or the demands of cold calls. This product helps develop and refine verbal communication skills through tailored feedback on the quality of the student's presentation, providing endless practice opportunities. Using Debrief, students can hone their persuasive legal writing using the same tools that major law firms across the United States leverage to perform better than opposing counsel. Students can learn to write with flair and command of writers at the top firms using Debrief's analytics and drafting tools. Not only can rhetoric upgrade and enhance your writing skills, but can now also help law students excel in the classroom and the courtroom while alleviating the stress of cold calls and performance demands. If you're interested in a demo, let them know you heard it here first, here from Nate. And to support this podcast, check out Rhetoric in the description below at userhetoric.com. One word, userhetoric.com.
Law students, are you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or short on time in law school? Maybe you just want someone to show you a step-by-step framework to master the topics you're learning in your classes. I know the pressure you're under, and I've got the perfect solution for you. My course, The Law School Operating System, is proven to help you conquer law school with confidence and ease.
Created by Lisa Blasser, a former guest on the podcast and founder of the Law School Success Institute, this course breaks down every subject into manageable main topics that you run through a comprehensive study system to thoroughly prepare you for class and final exams. No more feeling like you need to know everything all at once in the beginning.
But that's not all, Nate. The Law School Operating System also teaches you how to schedule your studying and time effectively. For every topic, you'll know which study step you're on and when you'll complete it every week of your semester. No more mad dash cram sessions, more time with your loved ones. And with my system, you'll walk into your exams knowing you've given 100% of yourself, that there's nothing more you could have done to succeed, and there's no better confidence than that.
Lisa breaks it down like this: one class, one list of main topics, and one system to master each topic. With recorded and live sessions for students available on her website and partnerships with law schools nationwide, the Law School Operating System is here to help you thrive from day one to the final exam. Ready to take control of your law school journey and operate at your full potential in law school? Visit www.lisablasser.com today and enroll in the Law School Operating System. Be sure to use code LSOSNATE10 at checkout for 10% off the recorded course. That is code LSOSNATE10 at checkout. People of the universe, Nate Crespo, your host for today and forever. And this is my conversation with Joel Ankney.
Well, we're doing great. It's a crisp, beautiful fall day, and what else could I do better than be on this with you on a Friday afternoon? So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much, and I'm glad that you wouldn't want to do anything else with your Friday afternoon than come here and talk to me. That's very exciting. But Joel, before we get started, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, there's a lot about me, so I'm not exactly sure where you want to start, but I have been a lawyer for 33 years now. I spent the first 12 years of my career at two large law firms, and then the last, 20, I'm trying to do the math, but 21 years I've been a solo attorney. I focus on a transactional practice, so I mostly do small business merger and acquisition work and small business commercial real estate work. And I've also written 3 books, and the books have been a wonderful way for me to kind of brand myself and market my practice. The third book, the one that you mentioned, was just published a couple of weeks ago. It really doesn't have anything to do with my practice, but it kind of tells my story of how I've obtained work and clients over the last 33 years.
Of course. And for everyone out there listening, early on, I'll say it already, but all of Joel's books will be in the description below. They will be linked below. So be sure to check them out, buy them, get them, learn more about Joel, because there's so much here, but you're going to get a little preview here before you get into the books. But let's go all the way back. It was a wonderful year. It was 1987. I remember it well. I don't, unfortunately. But you were at BYU. You graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology. And a year later, in 1988, you ended up at William and Mary Law School. Funny enough, I was just talking to Brian Glass, and he is also a graduate of William and Mary Law School. I was literally talking to him like 2 hours ago, which is super crazy. But so you guys will, we'll have back-to-back William and Mary graduates here. But simply put, Joel, why'd you go to law school?
I needed a job. That's the short answer. You had mentioned before we got on about um, some of your thoughts when you were in high school. I actually took a law class when I was in high school. I was slotted into that class because they messed my schedule up, and it was one of the only classes left that had any seats available. I didn't like it at all, and I swore I would never be a lawyer. I went to BYU and I got a degree in organizational psychology, and I thought that's what I would do with my life. I always intended to get more education after my bachelor's degree, but took about a year and a half off in between my bachelor's and going to law school. And probably about, I guess, in January of the year that I went to law, so January of 1988, I realized that I really needed to get in gear and figure out what I was going to do for graduate school. I looked at some MBA programs because I thought that was where I would be the next step for me. The curriculum looked terrible. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to do a lot of math and financial analysis, and that's what I thought I would be doing. I can't remember how, but somebody suggested I might look at a law school curriculum. I looked at it. It looked really amazing. So I kind of thought, well, I'm going to approach my decision by degrees, meaning that, I thought, well, I'll take the LSAT first and see how I do. If I do well enough for my liking, then I'll apply to some law schools and see what happens. So I signed up for the LSAT. This is, pre kind of internet days. I signed up. I went to a local bookstore. I bought an LSAT prep book. I studied in my apartment for 9 weeks, and I drove down to a college campus and took the LSAT. It was terrifying. It was a terrifying experience. And I did well enough. My academic history, especially if you look at high school, was not fantastic. College was a lot better. But I figured, well, I've done well enough. So I think I applied to maybe five or six law schools. I was accepted at three of them, and decided William and Mary had a open house and weekend. So my wife and I drove down there for that, did the open house, liked it. At the end of the weekend, the dean of admissions took us aside and said, "Hey, I don't know if you realize this, but because you guys have been living in Virginia for more than a year, you get in-state tuition," and that kind of sealed the deal. So, I mean, we started this in January of 88, and by August of 88, we were in Williamsburg and I was in law school. And terrifying, just a terrifying experience, but
So let's go into that terrifying experience. Not to bring back some past trauma, but
yeah.
the first year of law school, love talking about it. People love it, people hate it. How was it for you?
I think the first semester of the first year of law school was really sobering, kind of, smacked me in the face. I can distinctly remember, during maybe the second week of the first year, walking out of contracts class. The professor had called on me with 5 minutes left in the class. It was about a case. I had read all and briefed all the other cases. This one case I really didn't understand. And I asked a question back when he called on me, and he kind of eviscerated me in front of the class, told me that I was unprepared, that I was, it was disgraceful, all these things. And I remember walking out into the hallway on my way to my next class and literally leaning my forehead up against the wall and just thinking, what am I doing here? What have I gotten myself into? How am I going to get through this? So yeah, I mean, the whole first year was challenging. I went to law school a long time ago. And so when I went to law school, William and Mary had a very traditional first year curriculum. All grades were based on one exam that you took at the end of the semester. So you didn't really have an idea of, especially the first semester, of where you were at in your understanding until you actually got those grades back from that first semester. It was hard. And, but I really kind of attribute my experience, especially my first year, to having a just an amazing friend that I met during the first week of classes, and the two of us became study partners together, and essentially he was much better prepared for law school than I was. I wasn't prepared at all. I had no idea what to expect. In the first week of orientation, by the end of that week, I thought, I mean, I was surrounded by people who had, some of them had been preparing since they were in high school to be lawyers, or at least had the idea. And that just wasn't me at all. And so I felt like I was very behind on my preparation and even on my expectations, but I caught up pretty quickly.
So going throughout the rest of law school, like you said, you had the very good friend who helped you through it. So including that support system, what are some other important things that helped you get through law school, be resilient, and continue just to show up day after day after day?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a real kind of systematic person, and I'm a very much of a, so I think fear motivated me from the very first week of law school to create a system for myself. And I don't know that this system would work for anybody else, but, I created a system where I read for every class, read and briefed, and I would do it. So let's say I had a contracts and property class on Monday morning. As soon as those classes were over, I would go back to the library, take a little break, go back to the library, and I would read the assignments for those classes for Wednesday, for the next class period. So I was always trying to stay with my reading. I wasn't doing it the night before class. I was doing it the same day after I had walked out of class. And I think that helped me kind of, have enough space to digest things, to ask questions of my friends if I needed to, or to dive deeper and look at some horn books or nutshells or something like that. I don't even know if they have those anymore. I mean, one of the things you should mention, since we're not on video on your podcast, is, I mean, I guess people can tell, but it's been 33 years since I graduated from law school. So there's kind of quite a bit of space, and law school, I think, has changed quite a bit. Another thing that I did at my law school, we didn't have classes on Friday typically. I mean, if you did, it was like one class, but a lot of times, especially as a 2L and a 3L, you might be able to work your schedule so you didn't have any classes on Friday. I took Friday from the very first Friday of every semester. I took that Friday to outline every class and to basically build an outline through the whole semester, so that by the time we got to the end of the semester, my outlines were done. And then I was just using the study time. We called them reading days in my law school, but I was using those reading days to simply review, hit on the things that I maybe felt like I had some difficulty understanding, trying to synthesize concepts and build and take practice exams and things like that. So I was very kind of I guess my anxiety and fear drove me to try and do as much as possible and take small bites all semester long, and it was tedious. I mean, I remember some Fridays working for essentially 9 hours to outline classes and just feeling terrible, physically and mentally, but I got it done. And by the end of the semester, I felt I felt like I was really well prepared for my exams.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you're making there, is that you don't want to do it all at once. Just small little, each and every day, be consistent with it, be consistent over time, being able to sort of just bite away at it, bite away at it. Because if you just feel like, oh my God, I have to do this whole thing, and being organized as well is very important. So when that class comes around, it's like not like you're rushing the night before and you're trying to cram everything in your head, but the importance of being organized, sort of spreading everything out, giving yourself enough time to sort of take in everything and be able to do it all and be successful in law school as well. So those are great points. But moving forward in your law school career, like you said, you do mainly transactional work, small business, commercial, all that stuff. So through your law school experience, what I love talking about on this podcast, the significance, obviously it's great to know what you want to do with the law in terms of specialization, but it's especially important to know what you don't want to do with the law. So throughout your law school experience, how did you sort of figure out what you did want to do with the law, but especially what you did not want to do with the law?
Well, I had, I knew a couple of attorneys before I went to law school. And I went to church with them, and I just asked them what they did, and in fact, one of them took me down to the courthouse one afternoon, and I got to sit in the gallery and watch some, I think, two or three small trials and things like that. And so, I mean, I was really hesitant to go to law school because I did not want to be a trial attorney. I knew that before I ever went to law school. It's interesting, it's fascinating to me to watch, to observe, but I don't, I even doing mock trials in law school and things like that. I mean, I did them because I had to, but I went to law school because as I talked to some of those friends, they said, "Hey, you don't have to do that. There's this whole different route that you can take," and so actually went to law school with the idea that I wanted to be a commercial real estate attorney. And when I got to law school, I had really two objectives. One was to do what I needed to do to prepare myself to be a transactional attorney. That means, figuring out which classes to take and things like that, and what not to do. Like I was probably one of just a handful of people in my law school class who did not participate in the moot court competition because I was like, I just don't want to do it. I don't want to, it's not mandatory, and I don't want to be on a moot court team, and I don't want to, so I just didn't do it. The other goal I had in law school, of course, was to pass the bar. So, I took classes that would help me get ready for that as well. And that was it. That was it.
So, moving forward in your career, after law school, you became an attorney at Hunton and Williams. You were there for 3 years. Can you talk about that experience? How was your first job, your first real job in the real world, in the real legal world?
Well, one of the things I learned is no matter what you want to do, a lot of times you have to be willing to change a little bit. So I graduated law school in a kind of a mini recession, and I had been a summer associate with Hunton and Williams after my first year, and then for half of the second summer as well. And they had groomed me to be a commercial real estate attorney, but when it came time to make an offer, they because of the downturn in the economy, they weren't hiring any transactional attorneys. And so they made me an offer to be on their environmental team, doing environmental compliance and audits and some other things. And I took it because I liked the firm, and I liked the people at the firm. And I thought it was a good fit for me, a good place for me to be. And it was. I had some wonderful people that I worked with who trained me to be, I think, a pretty good lawyer. They taught me a lot of things, people that even people that I mentioned in my book still. But the environmental stuff just never really, I never really felt like it aligned with who I was and what I wanted to do. And so after a few years, I decided it was a good time to look for a transactional position at another law firm.
And indeed, it seems that you found one because in 1994, you became an attorney at Troutman and Sanders in 1994. You were there for 9 years till 2003. So can you talk about that experience? And as well, in finding out who you wanted to be and aligning those values, how did you sort of do that as well through your career?
Yeah, the to answer the last question, I think I've always tried to just be a curious person. And I think that's one of the things I love about being a lawyer is that if you are a curious person, the law is a great place to be because there's always opportunity to learn new things and learn about, I mean, it could be learning new laws, but it also can be about learning about new industries and learning how to interact with people in those industries. But so it says I know it says on my LinkedIn and everything that I was at Troutman for 9 years, but really what happened was I lateraled over to a smaller law firm in Richmond, Virginia called Mays and Valentine. They had about 130 attorneys at the time, with I think like 5 offices throughout Virginia. And I had applied for or I at least sent resumes over to their real estate team asking if they had a position on their commercial real estate team. Um, and what happened was they came back and they said, we don't, but we can put you on the corporate team and we can, we can teach you how to do real estate syndication work. And so you'd be kind of in the real estate industry, but you'd be on the corporate team instead of the real estate team. So I took it. I took the job. Again, worked with some wonderful people, but I still didn't become a commercial real estate attorney. And in fact, I became an attorney there that I never anticipated. I learned how to do merger and acquisitions. And I also, at one point, they needed somebody to help with intellectual property work. And I said, hey, that sounds interesting to me. And I'd be happy to help out with that. And they had a very narrow ask. They just wanted somebody to help with the intellectual property issues related to mergers and acquisitions. But as soon as I started to learn about it, I thought, hey, this is really interesting. And I learned from some colleagues in the firm and also colleagues outside of the firm how to do things like clear and register trademarks, do copyright registrations, do software licensing work. This led to all kinds of crazy fun things. Like at one point I was I worked with an entertainment lawyer at the firm and helped support his practice and got to do I've played one of Dave Matthews' guitars. There's a whole story behind that, but I've always got to do, perhaps not exactly what I wanted, but I've asked to do things and I've learned how to do things that have helped expand. But yeah, I got to be a transactional attorney. Eventually, I think it was in 2001, Mays and Valentine merged with Troutman Sanders. And that's why it says, because there's no Mays and Valentine. And then I think I stayed with Troutman after the merger for about 2.5 years until I started my own solo practice.
Yes. So now we are here. You, in 2003, started your own practice as an attorney at Ankney Law. Now, you hung your own shingle. It's great stuff. But as I found out throughout doing this entire podcast, is that it always comes with some struggles. It always comes with some obstacles. So can you talk about hanging your own shingle? What went into that? And what were some struggles that you had to face, if there were any?
Well, it was very kind of liberating. There was a lot of anxiety that I had to kind of overcome. Frankly, I have an amazing partner, amazing spouse, and she was really the person who said to me, probably close to a year before we opened the practice, she just said, I can tell you're not happy with the way things are going. What do you want to do? And I said, I've always had in the back of my mind that I want to open my own practice. I don't know why, where that came from. And she just said, well, what do you think we need to do to get there? And I said, I think we need to have a certain dollar amount in savings. At the time, we had 3 children, all under the age of, I think about 12 or 13 years old. And then lo and behold, we actually had our 4th child shortly before I opened my practice. But we ended up, she was wonderful. She helped manage the personal finances. And first of all, the stars kind of aligned, right? Like I was able to pay off all of my student debt during that 10-year period after I graduated from law school. So that was good. We didn't have that student debt hanging over us. And then we essentially used the money that we had been using to pay debt. We just started putting that in savings. So we never got to 100% of our goal financially, but I think we got to about 80%. And she finally just said, look, go do it. And she helped me find office space, buy furniture. The logistics wasn't very difficult. I had about 25 clients leave Troutman and follow me, although only about 3 or 4 of them actually had work for me to do the day I opened my doors. I think the first day I was open, I might have billed like an hour or 2, which was, again, a little concerning to spend the whole day at the office and to come home and be like, okay, I think I made, $150 or $200 today or something like that. So, um, but the one thing that I found that was really, again, just generous and eye opening to me was that as soon as I started to tell my friends around town that I was opening my own practice, and this is after I'd put my 2 week notice in out Troutman, so it wasn't like I was doing something under the table. Everybody was super supportive. I found that at least where I live in Virginia, the solo and small firm community is extremely collaborative and supportive. So I had friends who had their own solo practices who took me to lunch and said, "Hey, look, I printed up my profit and loss statement for you so you can see exactly like where all my expenses are, what I pay for this, what I pay for that." And then I had another attorney that I think I went to lunch with 6 or 7 times where he answered all my questions and he became one of my biggest referral sources. He was a family law attorney and, just had a lot of clients that had small businesses and needed help with this or that. So, no, I think the you asked about obstacles. I mean, they're certainly out there. I don't want to downplay that, but because I had been practicing for 12 years and I was at a firm where I was able to, pay off my debt and save up money and things like that, we tried to minimize as many of those risk factors as we could. So,
Oh, of course. I mean, it is a wonderful story, but within that story, many of your friends helping out these solo and small firms, the community around that is somewhat of a form of networking. So this is the network question for you, Joel. How important has networking been for your career? And
well, yeah,
oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
no.
I mean, it's essential. I mean, and this is an interesting question because I think I'm a pretty introverted person. And so walking into a room, especially a room where I don't really know a lot of people or maybe anybody, it is difficult for me to walk up to somebody or insert myself into a conversation. Now, over the years, it's become a little easier. And I have some tricks, too, but yeah, I mean, it's been, when I started my solo practice, my network really consisted of lawyers and other professionals that I had met through the projects that I'd worked on at the big firm. So I already had a lot of those relationships, or for example, they were attorneys who had worked at the firm with me and had left a year or two before me, or things like that, or so that that was an easier way to start a network was, hey, I've got kind of an alumni network of lawyers that I've worked with at 2 different law firms. And so that was kind of the foundation, I guess. Um, but yeah, I mean, the networking it's critical. And over the years, I have frankly, writing a couple of books is been my way to kind of overcome the cold call kind of aspect of networking, right? Like I'm not real comfortable with cold calling, or I use that phrase in quotes, but walking into a room and just walking up to somebody and saying, "Hey, I'm Joel. Who are you? What do you do? How can I help you? How can you help me?" That kind of thing. Um, so
So, like you said before, you're an introverted guy, but you have some tricks up your sleeve. And if I may ask, what are some of those tricks, if you would like to say?
Oh yeah, I mean the biggest trick, and it's a trick. It's funny that you brought up um Brian, was it Brian Glass? I can
Yes.
one His dad is Ben, I think.
Yes, it is.
So years ago I read Ben's book. It's called Renegade Lawyer Marketing, I believe that's the correct title. I know it says Renegade at the beginning, but in that book, it talked about like one of the best things that you could do for your marketing would be to write a book that kind of establishes you as the expert. And I really caught a hold of that idea, and I thought, hey, what a really cool thing. So one of the things though, that I didn't realize, and this is my biggest trick, right? So my biggest trick is that 7 years ago, I published my first book. And ever since then, anytime I walk into any kind of a networking environment, when people ask me who I am, I introduce myself as I'm an author and a lawyer. And inevitably, they want to know, what book did I write? What's the book about? And we end up talking about the book rather than talking about me. So it's not a me centered kind of conversation. It's a, and we may not even talk necessarily about the book itself, but they may want to know how I did it. They want to know my process. They want to know, how hard, how long did it take? All these types of things. And I love to talk about that stuff, right? That process. And what I've learned is that if I'm in a room, say with 100 or 200 people, if you talk to me and we talk about one of my books, you're going to remember that. You're going to remember me because I'm probably one of the only people in the room who's written a book, who says, they're an author. And so that helps kind of differentiate me. And it makes it also easier to talk to people about the book as the topic rather than me as well. I hate those questions like, what do you do? Like, what's your, well, I can tell you what I do, but a lot of times you're not going to really understand. If I tell you I'm a small business merger and acquisition lawyer, you may not understand what that means. Um, so that's the biggest trick. The biggest trick is having some sort of a differentiator that allows me to come in and feel comfortable in a networking environment to talk to people about a topic that takes the attention off of me in a way, and also makes me memorable to other people.
Oh, Joel, I could not agree more with that one. I mean, it gives you the guys, and not even the guys, that you are a unique individual, but having that author, being able to come out up front and be like, "Oh, I'm an author and a lawyer," you kind of, bringing the spotlight off yourself and putting it more towards your work and what you wrote about there, and sort of what your expertise is. You could dive into that and sort of the processes. So I love that because I myself as well hate talking about myself. I actually avoid it at all costs. Even when I'm at school, when people ask me what I do, I usually don't tell them what I actually do. I just sort of
Mhm.
like beat around the bush. I'm like, yeah, I'm online a bit, whatever. So I couldn't agree more with that. And it just allows you to talk about the things that you're good at and that you're interested in, and sort of get away from sort of just having it like yourself, sort of a self-centered conversation, like this is who I am, this is what I do, but rather, look, this is my work, this is what I've done, and I'm the author of all these books, and let's talk about those books now,
Yeah,
because
sure.
you have 3 books. Here's the deal: everything you wish a lawyer would tell you about buying a small business. There is Before You Leap, your legal guide to starting a freelance business. And finally, your brand new book that I have right here. People can't see it, but it's in my hands. Joel was very nice enough to send me the book. It was a wonderful book. I've recommended it to everyone, but it is Raincatcher, a lawyer's marketing memoir. So, with that being said, was Ben Glass's book the inspiration for writing that first book in the first place?
Well, I mean, to a degree, yes. I think I wanted to write a book, and in fact, I can recall sitting on a beach with my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law is a physical therapist, and both of us, saying, "Hey, it would be cool for each of us to write a book that kind of highlights something about our practice." Um, and then I kind of shelved the idea. I had an idea that I would write a book about like how to start a business, like how to start a limited liability company. But there are hundreds of books like that. So I kind of put it aside. I bought Ben's book maybe a year or two later. Um, my wife and I were actually on a trip across the country. She asked me what I was reading. I said, "Well, I'm reading this book," and he says in the book that a really good marketing tactic is to write your expert book. And I just said, I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to try that. I just didn't know what I wanted to write about, and because I had kind of uh, discounted the idea of writing a book about how to start a business, a small business. There are lots of those books out there, and they're good books, but I didn't want to get lost in that noise. Um, So yeah, I mean, his book definitely was a big factor in motivating me to go for it, to give it a try.
I mean, clearly, through what you're saying, there is a big importance on differentiating yourself and the work that you produce from others. So, why is that so important?
Wow, that's a question. I don't. I mean, that's a
I didn't mean to
that's a
dump that
question
on you
I
like
should
that.
ask. I should ask all my clients that question at some point. Um, the I mean, people, we could go real fundamental, right? We could say things like, people just have a natural distrust of lawyers. People think lawyers are a necessary evil. They don't understand what kind of value they bring to the process. They don't understand, and I think maybe that third one is a big one. Is like educating people on the value that you bring to the process. And I've had people, especially with my first book, who have called me up and said, "Hey, I read your book. I tried to do it myself, but I didn't realize that the process is very involved, lots of moving parts, and they said, we read your book and there's no way we can do this. And so, we'd like to hire you to do it for us." And I think that perhaps is how do you convey that value, the value that you're going to bring personally, not the value that any attorney is going to bring, but the value that you personally are going to bring to that relationship and to help that client, meet their objectives and do it in a way that it's always going to be stressful, but hopefully we can remove some of the stress from the process. And yeah, I think that's what that's the fundamental answer is you've got to show a potential client what kind of value you're going to bring to them.
Yeah, I didn't realize how loaded that question was. It was only till after it came out of my mouth I was like, oh wow, that's a real broad, that's a broad stroke right there. But I think you gave a great answer. It is fundamentally comes down to that is that you could draw people to your expertise, draw people to what differentiates you from others, and sort of what your subject area is where you could really help people when they need that help. When they realize, oh, I could do this myself, they go out and try to like, oh, I need Joel. Now I'm gonna go get him. So let's go to your new book now, Raincatcher, a lawyer's marketing memoir. Now, something you write about is the Raincatcher mindset. Now, what is the Raincatcher mindset?
Well, I have always heard, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this on your podcast before, but you talk about rainmakers. Again, as a more introverted lawyer, I've never felt that I'm really a rainmaker. I don't know that I can make it rain. But what I have observed during my career is that I have this abundance mentality, and I think there's a lot of legal work out there, and so I felt like it's raining all over the place, right? If we're talking about an abundance of legal work, there's rain all over, and you really just need to put yourself in whether it's a physical or a academic or an industry position to be there to catch that rain, to be like a rain barrel and just catch that rain because it's falling, it's all around. Certainly, there are going to be places. I mean, I have kids who live out west in Utah and Nevada, and it's a desert out there. And as a lawyer, you don't want to be perhaps in a legal desert, if that makes sense. I'm probably trying to be too abstract here, but yeah, I mean that rain catcher mindset has given me more comfort to kind of realize that, hey, there's an abundance of legal work out there. You have to figure out how to perhaps align, find that work in a way that, or how to put yourself in a place where you can catch that work, but it's there. And I think that taking the pressure off of yourself to say that every lawyer has to be a rainmaker is I think is can be healthy, can make you feel like, okay, I can accomplish this. I can do some what I would call, less stressful marketing tactics that align with who I am, with my personality, what my strengths are, and the work will come. The work will be there, and people will know it. They'll know who I am. They'll know what I can do. They'll be able to trust me, and that rain it'll fall, and I'll catch it.
Now, Joel, I'll tell you, you said the magic word, the abundance mindset, which is a part of the Raincatcher mindset. It comes up almost every single episode now. For the entirety of the whole podcast since I've been doing this thing, everyone loves talking about the abundance mindset, the growth mindset, whatever word you want to put to it. But how important is it to have that abundance mindset?
Well, I think it again, it's a question you have to ask yourself. Like for me personally, I think that by having, an abundance mindset, by reminding myself that there is going to be work for me to do, that I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have things to do during the day, that as I kind of cast my net, put my lines in the water, however, whatever, analogy you want to use, that something's going to hit, something's going to bite. And I don't have to necessarily be able to predict what's going to happen. I just can, have some comfort that something is going to happen. And, by having that, that takes some pressure off of me so that I can feel, I mean, and I think people notice that. They notice that you're not desperate, that you're not what I would call salesy, where if they feel like you're trying to maybe sell them a used car that doesn't work or something like that. So I don't know. I think it just kind of permeates through you, and that is observable by others, and it takes some pressure off of you internally. That's how I feel personally. I it takes some stress off of me to be able to check in with myself and say, it's going to be okay. It's always been okay. We've been doing this for 33 years. We couldn't have predicted probably 75% of what's happened to us in the 33 years, but it's all been good. And even the stuff that seemed maybe like a setback at some period of time actually ended up being, turning into something wonderful later on. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important facets of the abundance mindset is the fact that, you're constantly telling yourself it'll be all right. And also the sort of used car salesman sort of analogy is like they're the type of people that like, oh, I won't take no for an answer. But having that abundance mindset, it's like, okay, if they say no, that's all right. There's more business for me to get to. And maybe, that person who says no, maybe they weren't a great fit. Maybe we wouldn't work great together. It wouldn't have been a good business decision, but you're constantly reminding yourself like, okay, there are those fits out there. There are those people, those clients for me that I could go get, and that if I do get no, that it's totally fine. There's more for me to go look out for. So that's such a wonderful thing. Now, something you wrote heavily about, you talk about the 80-20 principle. So can you talk about the 80-20 principle and how important it is for a business as well as just a person in general?
That's interesting. I don't know. I don't recall. I think you're right. I wrote a lot about it, but I didn't call it that necessarily. And from my perspective, I feel like I can't be a perfectionist. That's one thing that I always feel like 80% is now. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I was trained well at a big law firm that documents don't go out 80% good, right? Like my documents hopefully don't have any typos in them, all the cross references. Now, it's not to say that I don't make mistakes from now and then, um, but from a marketing perspective, when you're networking, when you're marketing, things like that, yeah, I mean, throw lots of stuff on the wall and see what happens. And I think that, um, the idea of, I think what you're talking about is let's focus about 80% of our effort on the 20% of stuff that brings us. Is that right? Or yeah, I think there are a couple ways to look at that 80-20 principle. But for us, for example, the books have been our 80%. We focus I mean, probably a huge amount of our business comes from people who read my books or are referred to me from somebody who read one of my books. And so for us, we put a lot of eggs in that basket, and we push those books as hard as we can because we know that effort is going to bring us good results. I guess I don't know, Nate. I don't know if I'm getting to where you want to be, but that's the hardest question you've asked me so far, I think.
Well, I'm glad. Listen, I don't do softballs around here. No, I'm just kidding. But I think you answered it sufficiently. I think it's a great principle to have. Like they say, 20% of your work results in 80% of the outcome. So if you put in 20%, you get 80% out, and you could, become more efficient from that. But you may have been taking it from another angle. Now, you talked about being a generous guru.
Yes.
Can you describe what that means?
Well, I learned that principle from a lawyer that I worked for years ago who was very just open and generous about his time and his just working with younger lawyers and law students and just being there to answer their questions, whether they were substantive questions about a particular area of the law or whether they were more about how to be a lawyer, how to practice law, how to overcome different challenges that they were facing in their legal career. But he was just, I mean, the beauty about being trained by him in this idea is that he was, when I was working for him, he was in his early 60s, and so I could see the results. I have some stories in the book, and we've been kind of careful. They're not my stories, and so we've been real careful about not using the names of the clients that he resulted in his clients. But there, if I told you who they were, you'd be like, oh dang, I mean, that's those are some amazing huge projects and clients to work on, and high notoriety and things like that. So yeah, I've always felt like people, you're going to invest money in marketing for sure. But as a small firm attorney or as a solo attorney, I'm not going to be able to invest the kind of money that a big firm can invest, for example, in buying attention. Like, it's an attention economy. And I tried Google AdWords at one point. I can't outbid the other big law firms in town who are providing M&A services and things like that. And so instead, I've decided that, if I can't invest money and compete, what I can invest is my time. So I always look at my time as being just another marketing investment, a business development investment. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to, again, it's a big driver for the books, for, I've got a blog. It's not massive, but it's got some interesting things on it. I've got a YouTube channel where, in a way, people might say you give away too much for free. But again, I kind of feel like, you know, you're right, that's going to help me. It may help somebody, and they may not hire me, and that's fine. But those who do hire me, because they saw that, they understand the value that I'm going to bring, and they understand that I'm not going to withhold or perhaps say, you can only get this information if you get behind my paywall or something like that. So it's not to say that I don't. I mean, I'm obviously going to charge for my services, but I love. I mean, just like being on your podcast, I love sharing my experiences and my stories, because I've been very grateful for everybody in my life who has shared their experiences and their stories with me to help me along my path.
Yeah, I think, like you said, you mentioned something, the attention economy. It is an attention economy. That is what the internet, especially social media, runs on very heavily. Engagement, impressions, all that stuff. People care heavily about that stuff. Does it return things? I don't know. I got my own views on it. But
Yeah.
I think in general, giving that content away, one of my favorite creators out there, or entrepreneurs, is Alex Hormozy, and he gives everything away for free. He has thousands of video on how to build a business, marketing, doing contracts, all this stuff. His book I think he's coming out with the second book soon, but his first book, 99 cents on Amazon. It's as low as he could possibly put it, but he says every time at the beginning of every video, which is kind of a sales pitch in itself. Sorry not to call you out, Alex. He doesn't know me. He's not even listening to this. But he always says, I'm Alex Hormozy, acquisitions.com. I'm not here to sell you anything. That's how he starts every single video. And he makes it very clear. He makes his intentions clear. Like, I don't need your money. I don't want your money, but I'm giving this content so I can help you. I'm just being generous. And I think, like you said before, as I think, in everyone's portfolio, every person's portfolio, the most prized and most highest asset is their time. And when you use that wisely, when you're helping people out, it gets the word out there. It keeps people present mind of who you are and how you're helping people. So Joel, I love it all. I really do. But Joel, we are now down to our last 5 questions. The first of the 5 questions is something I've learned throughout the entirety of the journey of this podcast is that the law is moving in a certain way. We got all these new technologies, AI, software, whatever they may be. So this is sort of the tech stack question per se. What does your tech stack look like? What are some technology recommendations that you have for people, either from your business or just personally?
Okay, again, that's become the hardest question. I am not a Luddite. I like technology. But my tech stack is probably pretty weak. I wish I could boost it. I probably, if there's anybody listening who wants to contact me and tell me what I need, but I do have a case management application. I use Practice Panther. It works for me. I'm sure there are others out there that are just as good or maybe better for certain things, but I have a very, I don't need to keep track of dockets and things like that. So for me, it's a great place to, keep track of my time, send out invoices, get paid. It's been a good solution for us so far. Um, I use a Google Suite, a G Suite for most of my other stuff. I use we're very much DIY kind of people. So my wife has a degree in marketing and she's my marketing director. And so she handles the website and it's just hosted through Wix. And we just use their online tools to build our site. And I have a son who's a videographer. And so, we've got Adobe Premiere Pro, I think is what we use to edit video. But we also just use iMovie sometimes if we're just putting together a quick video. And we've bought some things like I have a nicer microphone that I use. I have a camera, a Canon G7 that I use, and things. That's not what we're using right now, but we if I have so I am very interested in artificial intelligence and AI, but I don't really know. I have another son who's a software engineer, so when ChatGPT came out, he got me right into it, and I've played around with it, but I haven't found where it fits my practice quite yet. I do have to say that it makes me worried. I have clients in the last year and a half who will email me and say, I had this question. I asked ChatGPT and this is what it said, and I'm freaking out. And I'm like, okay, the problem is that you didn't ask the whole question. You only asked the first part of the question. The second part of the question are there any exceptions to that rule? Yes, there are. And I'm doing something that qualifies you for one of those exemptions or exceptions. So you don't need to freak out. I've got you, So I do worry a little bit about how AI is perhaps giving some false guidance or false hope to clients, because I've seen it in my practice. Now I'm not anti AI. I love I use Grammarly, for example, to help me with my writing. And I bought the big, I beef it up. I don't use the free one. I use whatever, if it's premium or whatever it is, I'll pay for that. So I think there's a great role for that. I'm just trying to think of some other things that I've used but that's really my tech stack is pretty. The one thing I wish that I'm still kind of probably not as up to speed as I want to be on is some sort of a document assembly package. Hot Docs is on the expensive side. I don't know that I can justify that at this point. There is another, I do have a license to something called, I can't even remember now. They're not going to like me because I can't remember. Anyway, but yeah, document assembly I think would be helpful, but it's never been a huge issue for me yet. So, I have my own form library that I've built up over the last 20 or 30 years, and I'm always adding to that. And, but that's it really. I don't need a big tech stack. I don't think. I use a a couple of things that I like. I use an app called Todoist, which is kind of a just a very simple, visually intuitive project management software. We've tried using Slack to kind of collaborate with people that are. I have some interns that have worked with me or still working with me. It's only as good as people make it. I mean, I think it's a powerful tool, but I have people who are kind of like, oh, I don't I turn the notifications off and I don't check it very often. I'm like, well, then it doesn't really do us any good at that point. So, yeah, that's it. That's question two. I'm ready. This is the lightning round, so I should not talk so much. But
No, I mean, listen, there is beauty in simplicity, Joel. I'll tell you that. And we have very similar tech stacks, so don't worry. I'm a Google Suite man. I also use Adobe Premiere Pro for a lot of my videos, including iMovie. I use it sometimes as well. It's very simplistic, so
right.
don't find it hard. It doesn't take that long to learn. And then once you kind of get into the intricacies of it, I just go on YouTube and look it up. But ChatGPT, I think the biggest thing, because I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. I've been following it since it first came out, since they first introduced it, since it was literally on the internet. I was like on there, ready to go. But I found one of the big things with it, like you said, when that guy had asked the question, or that guy or girl had asked the question, and they didn't ask the whole question. That's one of the biggest things with ChatGPT that I found with sort of the large language models is that you gotta ask the right questions. You gotta be really, really, really exact with it, making sure you're getting everything in it. I also know little tips and tricks and such that you could sort of, manipulate it, get better answers. One of the big things, say at the beginning of your question, take a deep breath. I don't know why. They just give you more exact responses. Why does it work that way? I couldn't tell you. And then other things like saying, at the end, like if you're doing in like a creative way, trying to generate ideas, usually I like to write. So like for like podcast stuff, like I'll be like do it in a way like Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman
Mhm.
or something like that. And so they'll emulate the stuff that, they kind of did it. So we'll weave in so that stuff. So I found a lot of that stuff very useful. I'm still figuring it out. I think everyone's still figuring it out.
Right, right.
It has grown tremendously over time, but it's only going to get better and better. It's only going to get smarter and smarter because that's the whole point of it. It's a large language model. Every time you put data in it, it takes in that data and it continues learning and learning. So I don't know what's going to happen, Joel. No one knows, but I'm excited to see what the future holds. Now, second question, Joel, live on the Lawyers in the Making podcast. What are your book recommendations for people? Doesn't have to be about the law, just some of your favorite books you've ever read, something to give a gift to someone, and you could throw your own books in there.
Well, I think the book that I recommend, the book that changed the way I approach my practice that I read years ago is a book called A More Beautiful Question by an author named Warren Berger. And it's not written in the style of like The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck. It's not great literature, but the concepts changed the way that I interacted with clients. And for I mean, I had, as a young lawyer, I really always felt pressure to answer a client's question. And immediately, that's the first thing that happens. The phone call comes, you walk in the conference room for the meeting, the email comes, and your natural trained response is they're going to ask a question and I'm going to have to answer it. And this book helped me do exactly what you just said. Take a deep breath and think about, is there a way that I can ask a question to start the conversation instead of trying to give an answer? And that has opened up some just amazing experiences with my clients. So that's one of my very favorite books. I give that book away a lot to people. So A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. There are others. I'm just trying to think of, but let's just stick with that and keep going.
Of course. I mean, listen, I always love new books. We've never got that recommendation. So we always love new recommendations here on the podcast. So that is a new one, a more beautiful question. So, and I love that one too, because I hate people who just think when you ask them a question and they always have an answer, but it's probably not right. You always have to ask more questions because they will help you answer their questions. That was just a personal take. Anyway, moving on. Third to last question, Joel. What are the types of things you consume, not food, on a daily basis? either that be through social media, so consuming LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. People who still use Facebook apparently, Reddit. Any Substacks that you subscribe to, any newsletters that you would recommend, any podcasts that you listen to? What is crossing the transom of Joel's mind on a daily
Oh
basis?
my gosh, that's an I'm subscribed to your Substack.
Thank
So and I think I was subscribed anyway. Um, yeah, I've got some. I don't know. I mean, I've subscribed to probably 20 different Substacks. But because I'm trying to venture into that space myself as well. I'm just getting kind of dipping my toes in at this point. Um, but on a daily basis, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I've found that a lot of the people that I'm interacting with on the merger and acquisition side of things are on LinkedIn and like to consume content on LinkedIn. And I like to see what's going on. It is a little, I try and not be on too much social media. I am on Instagram a lot. I love photography is one of my kind of my interests. And so I do like to be on Instagram because I love the photography, the images on Instagram. And I like to share my own images as well. Um, but other than that, those are probably the two places where I spend most of my social media time. Um, I play Wordle every day. My kids told me that's passe at this point, but I'm playing, every day I play the loop. I do Wordle connections,
you.
strands, and the spelling bee, so that's just a thing. I love to try and do some sort of non-legal or even non-business reading during the day. And it usually happens right before I go to bed. Right now, I'm rereading The Fellowship of the Rings, but it's fall, and that just seems like a fall book to me. Um, so, yeah, that's I don't. I mean, we watch some movies. I binge a little bit of this and that. Right now, we're binging a show from the late '90s and early 2000s called The West Wing, which is I love anything that's about process, and that's what my books are about too, are about process. Like I think process is fascinating. So
What I have to ask, why do you think process is fascinating?
I don't know, I just like to know like the behind the scenes. Like people say things like, oh, that's easy, or you're a natural at that, or something like that, but that's really never the case. I don't think it's very rare that somebody is a natural at something. And so there's some sort of process that they've used. And, at the beginning, when you were asking me about law school, that's how I made it through law school, was finding my own process and then just sticking with it, tweaking it here and there, but really just, you know, and I mean, it's not a big, people are going to look at my background there. It's going to be pretty easy to find, but I did really well in law school. But that was because of my process, I think, not so much. I don't think I'm gifted or anything like that. I think that a lot of people that you look at and say, hey, so anything that helps me learn about process is behind the scenes. How did you write this song? How did you make this movie? How did you, whatever, how did you craft this argument? How did you come up with this idea? Those are all interesting things to me.
It sounds like are you a lover of intricacies? Would you put it as that?
Um, nobody's ever described it that way. I think I'm more a lover of what makes the magic. Like
Oh,
what, it seems like there's people have, everybody have, I mean, like you, for example. I did my due diligence on you as well as, so a lot of the things you've told me, I already knew. And in fact, I kind of anticipated that you were going to ask me the question about books. And so I had my book already picked out. But your success is because you figured out this process, you're tweaking it, and it's working, and that's great. I think it would be, anybody. This is why you like when I wrote the last book, Raincatcher. I didn't want to write a how-to book. I just wanted to write this is how I did it kind of book, or this is how I do it. It may not work for you, but this is my process, and it's worked wonderfully for me. So if you're interested in process, then yeah, I mean, all three of my books are about process.
Yeah, I mean that I listen, I most of my articles, if I'm describing what I did, I usually write at the end, I am only a young man and I don't really know what I'm doing. So, take everything with a grain of salt, please. But I couldn't agree more with what you're saying. I don't know why. I'm a lover of intricacies. I love the little intricacies. I think most things can be described as art forms. So, like I was telling you before, I love professional wrestling. And it's just because it's so intricate. There's so many little things that contribute to the bigger picture going on. It's like a good art piece. There's all these little things, but if you look at it in the big picture, it's like, oh my God, it's great. And then when you dive into it, it's like, oh my God, like look at this,
Right.
and look at this, and this connects to
Right.
this. So, with professional wrestling, it's one of those things as well. It's
Oh,
like dance, it's a nice tango.
yeah. And during COVID, my son actually, I guess he was 16 or 17 during the lockdown. And we do a lot of, like, as a hobby, we have, a number of guitars and bass guitars and instruments and stuff. And he started to teach me how to use GarageBand to record songs. And that I gained a huge appreciation. I've always been a big music fan. I've studied music as a kid. I played music in different settings and things like that. And I've always been like, oh, this is, you know, like, it's kind of easy, it's fun, it's easy. But now when I listen to recorded music, I'm like, wow, that even the simplest 3 chord song that's become a major hit has a lot of, maybe you're right. Maybe I am a lover of intricacies because there's a lot behind what goes on. I mean, I have had the fortune of being, even for a very small independent band, being in the studio and watching them try and record one track and watching them, do 10 takes on a 4 bar guitar lick until they feel like they've got it right. I mean, there's so much that goes into that. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And I think it's helpful to know because I think it gives me confidence to know that if I can find my process and follow and implement that process, that there's a good possibility that I'm going to increase my chances that something magical is going to happen. So,
Oh yeah, something you said there, appreciation. I have a great appreciation for everything that goes into it. I know one of my favorite sports, I love watching soccer. I have a great appreciation for it because I myself, I've played soccer before and I
yes,
know how difficult it is. So when someone makes a crazy play, someone scores a crazy goal, I'm like, I can't do that. I know I can't do that. I've tried
right,
it so many times and it's never worked before. So the fact that these people could do it over and over again, it just
yes.
to show first how talented they are, second how much work they put into it, but just how beautiful it is as an art form in itself.
Right, right. And watching off the ball stuff is crazy, right? Like if you watch Lionel Messi, what he's doing before he touches the ball, there's a lot going on there. And it almost looks like he's just casually strolling down the pitch. And yeah, no, I get that. I get that.
Yeah, there's a very famous video of Xavi who used to play for Barcelona, but he's looking around and he looks back and forth like 7 or 6 times. It's like, why is this guy looking around so much? It's because when he gets the ball, he knows where his guy is, he knows where the opponent is, and he knows exactly where to pass the ball. So it's
Yeah.
just like there's so many little things that make the beautiful picture. Oh, we're getting off track. We're getting off the rails.
Okay. All right. Well, you said we could
But
go off on
yeah, I
tangents.
know I did. And I loved it so much. I enjoyed that very much. But second to last question here, Joel. I got it. That was like one of the first times when we started going down the tangent, and we really went down the tangent. So I'm glad we did that. But Joel, second to last question here. You got your firm, you're doing consulting, you're writing books. But what does an ideal Friday night and Sunday morning look for Joel?
Oh, I mean, I think ideal lately has been I want to be outside somewhere. So morning, I have a there's a park near my house that's got a wooded nature trail. The loop is only like a mile and a half or something, but yeah, I've that's been a big Saturday kind of thing. In fact, tomorrow I'll probably do that. It's going to be in the 50s. I'll probably get up, go down there. It's a 5 or 10 minute drive, and then I'll walk around in the woods for an hour and a half or so. And I think that's really something that I've come to really enjoy is, even though I live in a city, is that if I can get outside, breathe some fresh air, especially be in trees, be in the woods or be on the water. I love to kayak and canoe, and if I get those opportunities, that's ideal. That's ideal. The other thing is slow. I like slow mornings. So, get up, go for a walk, eat at a slow pace, maybe read a little bit, do some New York Times puzzles, um, and just take my time. So slow, I like slow stuff, slow mornings.
That's so crazy because I was literally thinking I forgot to make my point about the New York Times games, but I love them as well. I hate the Wordle, but I love connections. Connections like that.
Right,
I could do connections for hours on end.
right.
I just find it great. It gets my brain going like crazy because like you have all these words and it could be something else, and then I'm like, oh well, this is actually these are TV show characters. These aren't like dishes or whatever. So just something like that. I love the connections game. But Joel, we're down to our final question.
Yep.
As the end of every single episode to every single guest. But Joel, what are your words of wisdom for the aspiring law students, the current law students, and the legal professionals out there in the world?
I think I've got maybe four quick points to make. We've already made one of them, is to have that abundance mindset. The second thing I would say is that there are going to be a lot of people in the legal profession who try to mold you into something or somebody. And part of your challenge is to figure out who you are as a lawyer and how that aligns with your personality, and and who you, not only who you are but who you want to be. I remember being in law school and having somebody um, craft an argument in my constitutional law class. And afterwards, we were out in the hallway and we were like, but is that really what you believe? And they were like, no, but if you're a lawyer, this is how you're supposed to act. I'm acting like how a lawyer is supposed to act. And I just thought, well, maybe you're acting like how a lawyer is portrayed in a movie or on television, but we're all different. And I think and what I've learned over the years is that everybody brings their unique style. And those are the most successful lawyers, are the ones who are able to find out who they are authentically and bring that authenticity to their practice. So that's the kind of the third and the fourth point kind of go together. Is really just try lots of stuff, like try stuff, like, whether it's marketing, whether it's different practice areas, whether it's, I mean, volunteer work, hobbies. I think trying stuff is a great way to figure out, where you want to go, what you want to do. And then the last thing that kind of goes with that is, somebody told me when I was in college that the only thing time does is pass. And they just walked away. And I just thought, wow, what does that mean? And I realized that what they were saying was, like, if you just wait, nothing's going to happen. Like, just time will just pass. And so I think it's worth it to kind of, you know, be kind of engaged in stuff, trying things out. If it doesn't work, fine. I used to call those sunk costs, but I read a book just recently called The Antidote. I don't know if you've heard of that book, but I can't remember the subtitle. It's something like, it's kind of a philosophy book. So it's kind of a pop philosophy book. So you might like that, but it's called The Antidote, and it's something like, I can't even remember, something for people who hate positive thinking. But he talked about affordable losses instead of sunk costs. And I like that idea better. Like, it's an affordable loss. Like, I can try lots of stuff and then I can decide, okay, I can afford to lose this. I can afford to let this go. But I think those are kind of the key things that I talk to people about.
Well, Joel, it's beautifully said. Like they say, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So you just got to keep moving, got to keep doing things. And that's where the magic happens. With Joel, that's the episode, that's the podcast. So thank you so much for coming on here, spreading your wisdom, spreading your experiences. And for everyone out there listening, be sure to check out Joel's book below, the new book, Rain Catcher, a lawyer's marketing memoir. And also check us out, lawyersinthemaking.substack.com, lawyersinthemaking, one word, substack.com. And I will see you all in the next one.